All right, so this week, the racing this weekend is pretty good to be fair, especially in Sydney and Melbourne. You got a lot of the Group 1 horses coming back, especially Godolphin ones like Tempted, Observer, Tom Kitten, those sorts of horses. So, somewhat interesting, but it's, tricky betting. And I also want to talk about, like, when the Group 1s start and, like, the, proper, like, competitive races happen. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to do one video this week, and that's going to be an Ombudsman race plan. Obviously, he's an entire by Night of Thunder, trained by John and Thady Gosden, owned by Godolphin. He was one of those really like superstar horses in Europe last season. Obviously, 2 years ago, he was a bit of a late developing 3-year-old. He wasn't targeted at the classics. He was kind of kept on the side, if you like. I think he won his second race in July, and he won 2 Group 3s in France, I believe. So he was kept away from the really hard races. Possibly targeted towards soft ground, and that was really the making of him, because he's gone on to be a multiple Group 1 winner last year as a 4-year-old. He started off winning the Brigadier Gerard Stakes, and then he came second in that race to Almackam. And then he won the Prince of Wales Stakes in amazing fashion, because, if you saw the race, he got held up, and, he got a really tricky passage through. And I think Anmard got the first run, but he just came flying over the top. And that was a really, sensational win at Royal Ascot on the big stage. And then after there, he backed up 2 weeks later in the Eclipse Stakes. I think most of us thought he had the race wrapped up. And then obviously Ryan Moore had a nerd fest. and came flying home on Delacroix. And then after that race, he won the Juddmonte International. He won fair and square, but he had that pacemaker in there, which really, made things... It made it easier for him, but it made things far more difficult for the other horses, I thought. So, yeah, after there, he... did he go to the Champions Stakes after that? I think he might have done, yeah. And that, he came second to Calandigan, who went on to be the best horse in the world. So, I think, I've said this in past videos, we need more of these sorts of horses running on for another season, because, they could just retire him, but, it's just great for the sport and the competitiveness of the top level races when these sorts of horses keep running on. So, yeah, I've got a few interesting races here that he could run in. To be fair, the plan looked a lot different yesterday when I thought he might run in the Shima Classic. There was some talk of him being stepped up to 1.5 miles early on this season, but I saw some of the betting for the race. I think William Hill dropped a market, and he's nowhere to be seen. So I don't think he's going to Dubai this autumn or spring, whatever you like. Depends what hemisphere you're in. I think he will end up over 1.5 miles, 2,400 meters this year. It was kind of a question mark last year whether he'd go there, but I think, the fact that they're pressing on with him as a 5-year-old, they're going to try and experiment that side of the fence, if you like. So, yeah, I thought he was going to go Shima Classic, but he's probably not now. So I reckon he'll start off in the Huxley Stakes at York at the, I believe it's the Dante meeting. It's just a 2,000 metre race. It's just a nice starting point, and it's enough time before, the Prince of Wales Stakes. So, no real, don't need to go into this too much. I think just a nice Group 2, 2,000 metres. There'll be, a few other fresh horses in there. You might get the winner of the, why's my brain gone? There's a Group 3 over 2,000 metres in April. You might get the winner of that go there. But yeah, I just think the Huxley Stakes, I mean, you could push him back to a Coronation Cup, but I think we know he's a star over 2,000 metres, so just run him in the Huxley. And then after that, I think they'll try and win the Prince of Wales Stakes again, just because they know that horse goes so well around Ascot. To be fair, he runs a great race every race, but he does do very well at Ascot. And yeah, just why not win another Prince of Wales Stakes, I guess. 2,000 metres at Royal Ascot. I don't need to go into that too much, I don't think. All right, now this is where it gets a bit interesting, because we've kind of done pretty vanilla stuff so far. But I think I think he'll go from the Prince of Wales. He could go the Eclipse again. They did that last year, the Prince of Wales to Eclipse back up. But I think they're going to, put him to the side for a bit, and then they're going to run him in the King George over 2,400 at Ascot. Extremely tricky race to win. Usually the cream does rise to the top here. The best horse wins. You could say that Goliath, the French horse, when he won, he might not have been the best horse, but the horses that were meant to win just tactically were inept, if you like, or the horses around them just were unable to set up the race for the good horses. So, essentially the best horse wins. It's a real staying test, especially with Aidan O'Brien's contingent. He always has, his good horse and then, two pacemakers, if you like. But I don't think he's won the race. He hasn't won the race in like 20 years. So, the favourite could usually be clear cut, but, there's often plenty of value. And if a horse like Ombudsman, who's up there with the world's best at 2,000 metres, runs here, it could make for an incredible race. And I think we saw, like in the Champion Stakes last year, Calandigan won because he was the best stayer, but he only just beat Ombudsman, or he might have beat him by like a length and a half. But I think Ombudsman's, staying abilities haven't really been explored yet, and I think seeing this horse over a mile and a half would really be the making of him. And if he doesn't stay, or he runs like third or fourth, you can just drop him back to a mile and a half, a mile and a quarter, where he's going to kill it. So yeah, I reckon King George. And then this one's a bit iffy because it's not far after the King George, and there's every chance he has a really hard race in that race. So I think the Juddmonte International, it'll probably come up too fast, but it's one of those flagship 2,000 metre races in the world, and especially in England and Europe, that it's just a massive race to win. I think when City of Troy won it 2 years ago, it was the real making of him, because it was against the older horses. I know he was doing that in the Eclipse, but there was like 3 or 4 of them, whereas that Juddmonte where he won was an international field with horses from Japan. You had Calandigan in there. So yeah, I think it's important that Ombudsman runs in the Juddmonte International, just because it's a world famous race, and won that Longines Award, I believe, in 2024 for being the world's best race, something like that. So yeah, I think it's important that he runs there. After that race, I think the champion, he's gonna have a really big end of the year. So I think the Champion Stakes at Ascot is just logical at this point. I mean, you could run him in the Arc. He'd have to do very well in the King George, and you'd have to skip the Juddmonte, and then you could do the Arc. But then, I think there's a better race at the end of the year over a mile and a quarter that you could target instead. I mean, you could go the So You Think route if he does, win all these races. But I think the Champion Stakes at Ascot is, the best time to send him off in front of his home crowd, if you like. He ran well in the race last year, likes Ascot. It ticks a lot of boxes, and it's a mile and a quarter, so everything's going to be kind of in his favour. Then after that, John Gosden has, at least in the past, has challenged on the dirt with a turf horse. He's done it with Mishrif in Saudi. I get it that that horse had Middle Eastern owners. It was probably he probably wouldn't normally do it, but he was successful in that adventure. He did it with Ravens Pass back in the day. I think he's still the only British trainer to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think. I could be wrong with that, but he's the most recent, at least. And then he's tried with other horses in the past, like Roaring Lion, who I believe ran in a Classic but didn't really fire. So yeah, I think the Breeders' Cup Classic, we haven't seen John Gosden go over there with one for a while, at least on the dirt. I know he went with Inspiral a few years back, but yeah, that would be pretty cool, I reckon. Ombudsman running in a Breeders' Cup Classic. And then I've also got here, if he does do Juddmonte International, King George, the Arc, then probably just the Breeders' Cup Turf would be the logical next point. Fast ground, which he didn't really like back in the day, but now he's become very accustomed to it. Yeah, fast ground, 2,400 metres. and it's more of a sprinty sort of 2,400 meters, if that makes sense. With America, they've got the bend, and their racing style, they get running early, as I've mentioned before. So yeah, I think the really daring move would be a Breeders' Cup Classic, and that would only be the result of a really empowering season, if you like. Otherwise, I'd say they'll just go Juddmonte International, then Champion Stakes, and then they'll probably finish it up there, or they go Breeders' Cup Turf. There's so many options for these sorts of 2,000 meter, mile and a half horses towards the end of the year. You could even go to Japan with a horse like him. And, especially with Calend again winning last year, it goes to show that these, European horses, if they're good enough, they can win, despite not having that much success there in the last 20 years. So, yeah, Ombudsman, he's a very exciting horse. It was, as I said, he was one of the, real celebrities of last season. So to see him run as a 5-year-old and, with the prospect of running over a mile and a half is why I'm a racing fan, essentially. Seeing these exciting horses stepping out of their boundaries and, challenging themselves and trainers challenging them. So, yeah, that'll be it for today. As I mentioned, there's not that much racing around the world this weekend. There's interesting horses running in Sydney and Melbourne. I like Kingswood I think it's the Herbie Dyke Stakes at T Rapa. If I was betting, I'd probably have a bet on him. There's a sprint in Dubai tonight. Flying Comet is returning. Who's a really interesting horse ridden by Sylvester de Souza. And there's some Godolphin horses in there that are dropping from 7 furlongs to 6 furlongs that could be interesting. But yeah, dropping in distance like that is never really... it's always a deterrent for me as a punter. And then there's some new race in Abu Dhabi on Saturday. It's worth $1 million. I think it's over a mile. I haven't really had a close look at it, but I know John Quill is running there. The Andrew Balding trained Juddmonte miler that went okay last season. But yeah, there's a few sort of interesting horses running in that Abu Dhabi Gold Cup, I believe it's called. And it's a new race, so that's kind of interesting. I believe it's Abu Dhabi's richest race. So yeah, that's it for me today. If you like this sort of content, just like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. That sort of stuff goes a long way. So thanks for watching.